Hello and welcome to my video on all things era level cap. So today I'm going to be going over what that cap is, why at the moment there's a hard paywall on progressing a character up their era levels, why it matters, and what might be coming in the future to change and diminish that hard paywall. So currently in game, just going over Stormtrooper Luke, who's the first marquee, the first era character that we have. As most people would have done so far, they've started progressing him up through the eras using gear that they've gotten mostly from Coliseum rewards, but also a little bit from the marquee and episode track. And then people who have been spending have been able to progress even further. I've spent a little bit and been able to jump a little bit ahead. They have eased the Coliseum difficulty, and so it's possible to continue to progress past 15. But eventually, if we keep going down, as I'll show, there will be, if things don't change, a hard cap around level 70, maybe a little bit earlier, in terms of how far we can progress an era character. So I've jumped across a trusty table to go through the maths behind this in a bit more detail. So I have here the amount of gear you need to take each marquee and also all 6 marquees up to era level 95. So you need all of this. Each mark of gear is usually for a region between 10 and 15 levels. So as you can see, and as I'll demonstrate in a bit, the first type of gear from Mark 1 to Mark 6, that's available in-game. Well, it is in-game. We can view this through the data mines, but we're able, in theory, to get this free to play by the end of the era without having to spend any actual hard cash to get to around the 65 to 70 level, depending, I think, on some oddities around what star you're able to get a marquee to. Let's say level 70 for simplicity, because I think that's where the actual cap is at the moment. To progress beyond that, you would start to need to collect this type of gear and in this volume, which, as I'll show, is just not in the game. You would also need this special type of gear called Xeric ability modules, which are only available to the marquee. I think if you take a marquee character to 5 stars or more, but most of it is from 6 and 7 stars. And as you see, most people will take a marquee to 6 stars day 1, 7 stars by the end of it. And if you do that, even then, you don't have enough of this type of gear to take all 6 characters up to level 95. So there's a lot of gaps in terms of the gear that we have in game and the gear that we need in order to progress beyond that level 70 mark. I should also mention that all of this is for the 6 marquees. I haven't included maul, just for simplicity's sake, and because we don't know exactly what he'll need. We can guess will be exactly the same as the marquees, but for simplicity's sake, I've just left them off the totals for now. But you could think of that as even more gear we will most likely need. This is just a rough illustration of when each type of gear will be made available freely to players as they progress through the Coliseum and the new marquees come out. Recent changes has made this progression a bit quicker, so even now, if you're free to play and maybe spend a bit of crystals, you could already be in this zone or even this zone. But this, I guess, is what you'd expect an early game account to reach in terms of when they're accessing different types of gear and different era levels. And this is the 2 types of gear that are currently paywalled. You would have to spend money to access this type of gear. And for era currency, yes, you can buy that with crystals, but I expect, to reach era level 95, you would just need vast volumes as well, which I haven't done the maths on, but would also expect that to not be available free to play in the game. Where are we getting this gear from? If you look through the Coliseum rewards, it's just not in any of the tiers, even tier 7 and beyond. It only goes up to Mark 6, that's this era upgrade basic 6. And the last tier, is relatively good reward, has era currency, not the Mark 7 gear. There are these special Coliseum boxes, but again, that is just Mark 6 gear and era currency. There is a minute amount of Mark 7 gear in the Darth Vader marquee, but as you can see, if you go to tier 4, which I think is either 4 stars or 5 stars, that is 300 a day. Across 7 days, 2,100. That's not enough to take one character from level 70 to level 80. Never mind 6 to level 95. So this really, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't do anything, and we still don't have this gear freely available. So I guess, what does this cap look like? So I visualized this a bit of an oversimplification, but I hope it gets the point across. If you're a spender, so this ping here, you're able to push past the era level 70 by buying those packs at pretty much any point. There'll be some other limitations on how quickly you can progress, but at some point you'll be able to move past 70, get to 95 if you so choose. If you are a crystal spender, let's say you're endgame but free to play, able to drop a little bit of crystals on the crystal gear packs or the era currency, you can make a bit of progression ahead of sort of early game free to play players. Initially it was the stepped approach because you'd just be locked out once you reached level 16. That has changed because they've reduced the difficulty of the coliseum a bit, so it should be a more linear progression, but you're still ultimately going to reach this cap at level 70, the exact same as if you're really not spending that much. If you're a complete free-to-play player, very new, don't have the crystals to drop on Coliseum, you can expect a much more linear progression to the same cap, but towards the end of the era. What's odd about this is that we have this level 70 cap, but there are these star requirements for era levels where only one, as it stands, actually means anything, which is, I think, very odd. And what led me to start thinking about this a bit more is that if you get 4-star marquees, you can go past level 66. So in theory, you could get to level 70. But at the moment, given the available gear that we have in the datamize, you can't progress beyond that. So it doesn't matter if you've got 5, 6 or 7 stars. If you're not dropping money in packs, you're not progressing past level 70 as things stand. So yeah, I found that very odd when it came to their anniversary post and how it actually translated to the game. So why do we want era levels to begin with? There is a cap, but why does it matter? The first reason is at the end of the era, depending on your era level, you get a specific gear level when that character transitions to a normal character, a legacy character, as they call it, at the end of the era. Level 65, which CG expects everyone to get to, and I think bears out when you look at the numbers, will be gear 12. So you'll save a bit on Carotech, other gear, that's great. After that, you would have to progress beyond level 70 to get to. The first gear 13 is at level 75. Be great to get to, but at the moment seems pretty difficult. And the same for the other relic levels, and also for level 95, which gives you Zetas, which would be very useful for new accounts or relatively big spenders. So yeah, the cap currently makes most of this impossible if you're not spending money, and you'll really just get to gear 12, which again, bit odd. The other reason to progress era levels is to improve your performance in the daily Coliseum leaderboard. The cap has less of an impact initially. If you're able to spend a bit in terms of crystals or actual money, you are typically able to get ahead of other players not doing that. And then the way it works, you'll tend to stay ahead, just the way the progression system works, and you can bank a little more era currency. Where the cap will come into play is that eventually you could have this massive squash of everyone reaching level 70 and just staying there, or level 65. And it doesn't matter at what point you got there, you're just stuck there, and it becomes this huge, I don't know, RNG fest of people fighting out all at the exact same era level. Will this happen? I don't know, but if the cap does exist, this is a real possibility. So that's going through the gear we need mainly for the marquees and how the marquees work. How does the journey guide fit into all of this? And I think this is one of the things I haven't seen discussed that much when it comes to era levels and the Coliseum changes, and that is because the journey guide character Maul and the journey guide is not actually in the game yet, so we don't have this information, and I think it could be one of the missing pieces that we have when it comes to this whole progression system. So the era journey guide works a little bit differently. At the start of week 9, which is the 5th marquee, we will get access to both the 4-star and 5-star journey event, where we can get a 4-star, 5-star Maul if we have 5 marquees, which we will do at that point. Obviously, you'll have to spend a bit on the marquee events in order to access that. Then in weeks 11 and 12, when the final marquee comes out, we will be able to access the 6-star and 7-star events, and you will need those 6-star and 7-star marquees in order to do so. Yeah, so you can see this is very backloaded. In Era, we're only getting the journey guide right at the end, but could potentially have some implications when it comes to the Era level and the cap. So is maul the answer? Potentially or potentially not. So if we return to the anniversary post, they mentioned, I think, 4 ways in which we'll get Era materials. Through the Coliseum, which we've seen, I can see the data mines. Through the Era marquee, sure, not very much, but yes. And through the episode track, again, very little amount, but yes. And through Era journey events. So this is the one thing that we cannot see because it is not in the game at the moment. So the question is, what materials are we going to get from the journey events? Are we going to get different materials from the 4, 5, 6, and 7-star events? And are those going to be what can push people beyond the Era level 70 cap and maybe reward investment in the marquees? I guess that is an option. But the first option, and the boring one, is that it essentially just gives you the gear to catch up with the rest of the marquees. And by the end of it, or maybe just by the first one, you have enough gear to take maul up to level 65, like the rest, and that's where everyone will stay forever until they become legacy characters. So not very interesting, but I guess maybe expected. The other option is that maybe the 4-star or maybe the 4 and 5-star events get you caught up on that gear, because currently the only gear we have in the game is for the marquees. It is not for a 7th character, which would be maul, so we would need that gear in order to catch up. And then maybe the 6 and the 7-star events will have that extra Mark 7 and Mark 8 gear, maybe just to take maul up to level 95 or even 80 or 90. But what would be very interesting is if it would have the gear to take everyone up and beyond that Era level 70. That, I guess, could be very unlikely, but is a possibility, which I'll go through in my conclusions. But yeah, I guess the thing is we just don't know what gear is in this event. From what CG have said, we know there will be something there, but will this be the thing that actually makes investing in a marquee character useful when it comes to getting Era levels? Or do we just need to think of marquee investment and Era levels as two completely separate things? And if we want to progress in Era levels, you just have to spend money, which is terrible, but might just be the grim. Okay, so I'm going to wrap things up with my main conclusions and what I think this ultimately means for how we invest in characters going forward. So first of all is what I think as the mark against that Mark 7 and 8 gear could be behind the maul journey, and that is odd that CG hasn't told us this or hasn't given a generic trust me bro, if you take marquee character up to 5, 6, 7 stars, you can hit their advertised Era level. That would be a bit odd. You would think they would want to incentivize that early on. I think the pro, or the reason that there could be Mark 7 and Mark 8 gear behind the maul journey is that it's equally odd that they have these star requirements for Era levels, like 4 stars required for level 66. If at the end of the day they don't really mean anything, you can take marquee character up to 6 stars, but that doesn't mean you just get it at the, I can't remember, like the level 80 that they said it's required for. You then have to spend additional money on top of the marquee purchase, which, let's face it, is also whaling, in order to get that Era level. The only slight benefit is the 4-star, where you can get to level 70 maybe if you don't buy anything more. It's just odd that in a system that they deliberately isolated from all other aspects of what they call the legacy game, they have this link between stars and Era levels where it doesn't really mean anything. If, let's say, they don't introduce any more free ways to get the gear, to get a character up to Era level 95, you'd have to be spending loads anyway. Why have this artificial restriction on marquees on top of that? Why wouldn't it CG just be with people spending? Yeah, it's strange, and the only thing that I think makes sense is that we will be getting the gear to level up just a lot later on in the era, and maybe part of it is they're deliberately hiding the facts and maybe tricking people into spending hard on era gear when they could just wait and get it later. I don't know if this is the case or not, but I think it is a potential pro for the soft theory that Mark 7 and 8 gear is within the maul journey. But ultimately, if this is true and this gear is coming, it's just coming later and it's linked to the era journey, this is still not great for free-to-play players. For a free-to-play player to get all 6 marquees and unlock maul level 7 stars would be very difficult. So this is still really in the domain of the spenders. But I think nevertheless, it's not great to have a complete hard cap when it comes to spending money, and it's not something CG have really done before, so it's a bit of a worrying sign if this is the case. Even though it's still in theory difficult for free-to-play players, it would still be nice to have that opportunity, even if it is difficult. And then also, if Mark 7 and 8 gear is behind maul, people with 7-star marquees would still have to wait until the very final week of Coliseum and the era. So they would have to wait until that final week to actually reap the benefits when it comes to the Coliseum leaderboards. So there's no real advantage to getting a 5 or 6 or 7-star marquee when it comes to that leaderboard, because it would all be very backloaded. So if you wanted to perform well in leaderboard, you'd still be incentivized to spend early on gear and currency. Then finally, I think it's still absolutely best to still hoard gear the old-fashioned way, because this is very much pure speculation and you really don't want to be caught flat-footed when maybe maul comes out and there's a month to go and there is no more quote-unquote free gear. Then you have to save relics and materials for 7 characters, which is kind of crazy. So best to start that now and start hoarding gear, which is frustrating. It is annoying to have a system where you in theory unlock a character but have to wait 3 months to actually put gear on that character, and it'll be very hard to manage that gear, especially in game. There's no real way to see what you need, so you have to just keep track of all of this gear and relics you need for 7 characters that you'll have in 3 months' time, which I think is very bad game design and just quite frustrating, really. But yeah, that is my video here. I'd be very appreciative if you found this interesting, to drop a wee like, subscribe if you're interested, and yeah, see you next time. Thank you very much.